Yeah, so let's go over some pressure flaking. Now, pressure flaking is a form of flint knapping. Typically it's done last, but it's also done throughout the entire process of flint knapping. Let's get into it. A couple baseline tools that you're going to need are these guys right here. These are antler tines, and they come from an antler shed, and these are just the very tips cut off. They're super hard, and they are great for making small points, arrowheads, anything like that. Hand pads, you need some sort of hand pad. This is going to protect your hand. I usually use a piece of leather. These are the ones that I include in my kit. I also use pieces of bison, which is a little bit thicker. You can use an old towel. Anything that's going to allow you to protect your hand. In most of my kits, I provide two, one bigger, one smaller, or relatively the same side. Gives you a little bit more extra cushion, if you will. As you're driving little micro flakes off of that big flake to make that arrow point, you want to have something to protect your hand. Lastly is some sort of stone. So these are all just little river cobbles, garden stones that you can pick up. I would say anything that's about the size of a golf ball up to a small, tangerine or one of those little oranges works really well. Kind of the smaller the better, especially when you're doing any sort of pressure flaking. One, you can use it as an abrader to abrade flakes. Two, you might need it to pop off some little portions of mass on that flake. All right, let's get to pressure flaking. Flakes can come in a variety of sizes. They can come from the larger, the small, they can be twisted, they can be nice and flat like this guy right here. But ideally you want a flake that's going to have a little bit of thickness to it, a little bit of mass. If it's too thin, it's going to wind up breaking in your hand. You can still work it into a small point, but you just got to be a little bit more careful. Now when you're flaking, the one thing I like to always do is kind of hold this guy up to the light. And when I hold it up to the light, I can see the really thin edges the whole way around. Right up front, I like to take my abrasion stone and just start working those edges. And what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing the edge. A sharp edge will just crush under pressure. But an abraded edge that's nice and abraded is going to hold that antler tip, allow you to remove a flake. So when we're flaking, we're going to use our legs and our hands in conjunction with the pad, the flake, and the antler tine. When I'm pressure flaking, since I'm right-handed, this is my strong hand, I'm going to hold these pads in my left hand just like this. And the flake is going to be grasped by my fingertips. I'm not squeezing it super tight. I'm just kind of holding it there. I'm holding it up on the pad and I'm looking at my edge. With my other hand is my flaker. I rest this in my fingers and I'm going to use my hands to hold the flake in the pad, and I'm going to use the flaker and I'm going to put it right up on the edge. You can even come a little bit behind the edge or on the edge to drive a flake off, just depending on where the mass is. When I look at my flake, I see I have a lot of bulbous area over here. I might use my stone. But what I can do is I can go around and I can start shaping it by driving flakes off of this bigger flake with my antler tine. I can also hold my flake up like this. This will give me a little bit more eyesight on my flakes where I'm placing my antler tine, but I lose a little bit of my pressure. I lose a little bit of my strength. When I have it between my legs, I'm using all the strength of my legs and my hands together. My left hand is up against the inside of my leg, kind of right on the side of my knee. It can drop a little bit, but I don't want to be moving my wrist. I really want to hold this in place and use these two like a lever. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start going around this flake, and I'm going to use the antler tip to pressure flake all the way around. All I'm doing is placing the flaker on the edge, pushing in, and I'll remove little flakes and I'll get a little pattern on the backside. This first phase is just kind of roughly figuring out the shape that I want to go in. I can do a couple things. I can try to break this end off through some percussion, and I can think of a little point that might exist right in here. I got a little bit of a funky piece of material up the top. I want to make sure to reduce and get rid of this. But really I see my point resting in here. Just because a flake has a very unique shape doesn't mean that that's the shape of your arrow point. I could make my arrow point from this corner right through here, getting rid of this, removing all that. So you just kind of visualize what's the easiest solution, where's the thickest portions of the flake. When I flip it over, I can see there's a nice flat area right through here. This right here might be my actual arrowhead. Using your abrasion stone in a downward motion to remove flakes. Side to side when you abrade. Never come up towards your face. You could throw flakes into your face. That's a little thick. So I'm going to try and remove this mass. I see the mass. I see a little piece sticking out. I'm going to pop it off. There's another piece. When I'm striking with my stone, I'm just striking the edge. I'm not hitting way up on the stone. I'm just striking the edge and ripping a flake off. Alright, done a little rough shaping. Got some good mass here. I've actually thinned it out just a little bit. Now I'm going to go through and start shaping it. Fingers are holding the flake. Flaker's in my hand. This is like a lever. Putting it right on the edge, popping it over. I push in to the edge, and when I push into the edge, I'm pushing in and then gently over into my hand pad. This will release a flake and give you a little flake pattern like that. Even this way, I'm still pushing into the edge and popping down. This comes with a little bit of hand strength, but it's doable. And one thing you'll see me doing is flipping the stone, If you pressure flake all the way around, what's going to happen is one edge will raise itself up naturally. And that's not a bad thing, but you have to remember when you look at the side of your flake, I see an unevenness. I see larger mass here, I see larger mass here. If I only remove the flakes from one side without alternating, or paying attention to where this little squiggly line is, even on that side you can see it, I'm going to wind up having an uneven point. So I have to look at the balance. I have to look at an imaginary line that goes right down the middle that actually just is like a sandwich. Bread here, this is the peanut butter. And anything that's on this side or this side I need to remove, but I have to be cognizant of where that line is. If I do it too much on one side, I'll get a twisted or uneven point. If you find that your point's slipping off, take your abrasion stone, give it some abrasions, and they'll start gripping and ripping right off. Another thing you're going to want to do with your antler tine and your abrasion stone is just shape the tip every once in a while. They can wear down, but just keep it reinforced, keep it ground, and you'll be good to go. Alright, once your flake is thinner, it's not too fragile, you've got most of the mass worked out on those bigger ends just through pressure flaking, or even just using your hammer stone to kind of pop some of those edges off. This is where you'll start to kind of really recognize and establish the overall, size as well as the style of point. Now, the great thing about pressure flaking is, especially with flakes like this and making arrow points, is you can get really creative with your own style of arrow point. Maybe that's what we'll do today. Just popping flakes. Pressure on the edge, pushing in, down. Always towards the hand pad. Working down the edge. When you make points, you just think, what am I going to use this point for? What's the intended target? And that's going to help shape your design. Sometimes a stone will let you know exactly what it's going to be, but we do have some input into the process. There. About coming to the end of this point, let's make it look a little bit final shape, just a few more little pops, and we'll be good to go. Nice. Get that one little spot right there. And when you're starting off, just try and make a point, something pointy. And that's going to be the arrow point. Now it's going to look like this once you haft it into an arrow. This is a similar style. You slide it into the recess of the wood, glue it up with pine pitch, wrap it up with sinew, and you've got a nice long cutting edge. Once you're done, kind of giving it its final once over, just making sure all those edges are nice and sharp. If you got an arrow gauge, you can slide it into an arrow. I usually take that antler tine, place it on my leg, and just give myself kind of a visual on how it's going to look when I haft it into an arrow. An antler tine's a good measurement. Will I be able to have a little bit sticking out that I can wrap with pitch and sinew? Absolutely. This is very similar to what the hafting will look like once it goes into an arrow for this point. I like these leaf shaped points, nice wide cutting edges. Really gets into the flesh of whatever you're targeting, but it's a really easy style of point, especially if you're just learning out. More importantly, you don't need any notches in there. It just slides nice and neat. Glue it, wrap it, away you go. So that's it when it comes to making a real simple arrow point using, real simple flakes. Nothing too complex, nothing too big or too bent, but a nice little point that you can throw on the end of an arrow, with a little bit of glue and some sinew, you'll have yourself a nice little arrow point. So it's not too hard to produce something like this, especially with one abrasion stone, a couple antler tines, and some leather pads. Remember, this is how you would haft this style of point into an arrow. All right, hopefully that helps. Appreciate everyone watching.